Digimon Survive is out, and I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to actually believe I'm saying those words out loud after such a long 4-year wait. But with that 4 years has come uncertainty, misunderstandings, and in some people, apathy. So on today's video, now having played up to Chapter 6 of Digimon Survive, but don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything in Digimon Survive in this video besides some very minor evolutions. I'm going to be talking about my experiences, why I think Digimon Survive is such a wonderful game, the good of Digimon Survive, and the bad, and whether I think you should pick it up. What is up, digital companions? My name is Karn EX and welcome back to another video, and yes, my initial thoughts, my should you buy this with the good and the bad for Digimon Survive. Now, in full transparency, you can probably see that yes, I have some Digimon Survive goods around me, and I do want to be very clear here. Bandai Namco US sent me, as well as a lot of other creators and kind of personalities online, these swag boxes. That is all that Bandai Namco US gave me physically. I bought my own physical copy of the PS4 version, but Bandai Namco UK did give me a Steam code. But again, that's it. I have not received any sponsorship for Digimon Survive, I've not received any money, not been told anything I can say about Digimon Survive. This is entirely my own opinions of this game. And while I am of course hugely thankful to have received those goods and the code for the Steam version of the game, I was never and will never let that kind of amazing treatment from the people that make these games influence my thoughts on them. So, there we go. Generally, I want to say that I am loving Digimon Survive. As I said, I'm up to Chapter 6, but of course will not be spoiling anything from the games apart from some minor evolution stuff like what Agumon's champion was for me on my run, and of course nothing from Chapter 5 onwards at all. The thing you first have to understand about me is that I am not a visual novel guy. My love and basically knowledge of visual novels extends to and ends at the Ace Attorney series. I am a huge fan of the Ace Attorney games. I've played some of the visually novel kind of things in the past, but I've never stuck with one. Even ones of franchises I love already. The second thing you should know is that I've not played a single Fire Emblem game, not even like Three Houses, or Devil Survivor, or like really any SMT. I've dabbled a little in SMT and played a few Persona games over the years, but that's about it. So my main tactics games are going to be Final Fantasy Tactics, Tactics Advance, and Advance A2 Grimoire of the Rift, and like Onimusha Tactics Pokemon Conquest, I guess. So what I'm trying to impart to you, I guess, is that I am a huge Digimon fan, and a fan of some games in the two genres that Digimon Survive is a part of, but generally not a massive fan of either. Which is why I hope I can give a unique take here that hopefully you will understand is coming from someone who is not necessarily a huge fan of these genres to begin with. And that's why I've got to say that Digimon Survive is wonderful. The story, the characters are absolutely charming. The world is beautiful, and well, yeah, there are some low quality assets here and there. Most of the assets are actually incredibly beautiful, especially when you're looking at characters and environment. They all look very good. All of the PNGs, live 2Ds, whatever we're calling it, I would call them sprites back then, but I think they're a little bit bigger than sprites, are so gorgeous. For the human characters, the Digimon or Kemonogami, they all look great. Like I say, there are a couple of low quality assets I've noticed. Usually it's like plant life, like things like grass and things like that. I don't know why that is. This is a Switch and PS4 game that's also ported to Steam, but I don't feel like those very few low quality like grass assets are representative of the game at all, because they're so few and far between and almost seem to like stick out against some really graphically beautiful backgrounds. It could be that this is a mistake or is some sort of weird intentional thing, I don't know, or is just a limitation of the hardware that it's made for. Something I should say while I'm talking about this as well is that in Japan it is only a Switch and PS4 game, but outside of Japan it is a Switch, PS4, Xbox and PC release. I have heard that there are some frame rate issues with the Switch version, which is basically every Switch game at this point.
Karn EX.
You made a joke!
And that there was a codec issue, and this is the first kind of bad thing I'd say, but we will get into a full bad section in a minute. But my personal experience is playing on the PS5 with the PS4 version, which means I get the PS4 Pro enhanced version. And I think if you have an Xbox One, PS4, the next series, Xbox Series X or PS5, you're gonna have a really good time with Survive. I think the Steam version as well, my version did not have any of the issues, is also a pretty good contender. I don't know if I could recommend the Switch version because I don't personally have it, but I have heard that's probably the worst performing of all of the versions, but again, you're kind of sacrificing performance for portability with the Switch. And while we're talking about that, let's just start with the bad, because to me, there's very few things that are bad. The main issue I believe with Digimon Survive right now is not even the game itself and is more the launch of the game. The US version of the game, if you buy it physically and possibly digitally, includes a code that gets you a first month bonus Guilmon. It acts as a recruitable Digimon, it can digivolve all the way up to Gallantmon, and you also get some HP items. A lot of people found out in America that this code was printed at the bottom of their GameStop receipt or their Best Buy receipt, wherever they bought it from. Bandai Namco is now sorting out in the US that if you did not receive your Guilmon code, if you're in the US, you can get them. But the US isn't the only territory, is it? People in Spanish-speaking countries, people in the UK and Europe, people in Australia. Turns out, for example, for me, the only way to get Guilmon is to get the digital month 1 version. I bought the physical version. And when I was giving my review code, it did not include Guilmon, I guess because it technically wasn't month 1 edition, it was like a review edition, I guess. And these problems do permeate throughout the entire world, pretty much. Everyone has a slightly different thing that's wrong with their early month Guilmon. But then also, for example, at least in the UK and I think other territories, the box did include a thing that you could redeem to get free promo cards, the Digimon Survive promo cards that they initially gave away at Anime Expo. There have also been supply issues, but I'm not necessarily sure this is a Bandai Namco problem. And again, I can't say this is true for every region, especially countries like Germany who have had huge physical delays until like into August, towards the end of August. But a lot of that documentation, a lot of people talking about that are speaking German. I don't end up seeing it a lot in my feeds. And when I do, you know, machine translation is not accurate at all.
I don't understand. I don't understand.
But I do think those issues are probably more on retailers' sides because they didn't, you know, fulfill enough pre-orders. They didn't think they'd get enough pre-orders or real orders to put in with Bandai Namco. I don't really know. It is still a ball drop, but it's not necessarily one that we can definitely blame on Bandai Namco in every territory. The next thing that's not directly related to the story or the gameplay is the thing that I touched on before, and that is the Steam codec issue. I believe if you have certain fairly common codecs installed on your computer for watching media files, doing certain programming like video editing, even game making, I think potentially, can cause incompatibility with Digimon Survive. And in addition to that, across the entire game, on pretty much every platform, there is a lot of mistranslation and text error. It's not as prevalent early on, but does get worse as the game goes on. And there is a very famous error going along right now, which I'm going to show on screen, but censored because it contains spoilers. And that is the famous line, which I'm sure is going to become a very big Digimon Survive meme, saying that Takuma's portrait and text do not appear in this scene. My favorite line of dialogue from our Gogglehead. I think these all could very easily be patched. The Steam version definitely, and a lot of these mistranslations. I think some of the real issues with mistranslation are obviously things where some of the intent is missed, but generally I actually think most sentences convey what they're trying to say quite well, but they often either forget pluralization, slightly misspell words, or probably the most common thing I saw was a lot of misgendering, I guess you could say. It seems to me that in Digimon Survive, everyone's Kemonogami is the same gender as the character. So Takuma's Agumon is a boy because Takuma is a boy. Saki's Floramon is a girl because Saki is a girl. But regularly throughout some of the chapters, you will see that some Digimon who were previously called he will be called she, and even some human characters like the professor will be called she, I believe. Again, to me, I don't really care that much. I get what they're trying to say. It's a funny stream moment, but I can understand that it definitely pulls you out of your immersion in that respect. And then finally is a personal gripe for me, and that is that the options you can choose in the game are all far too easy to know. Now, it's actually quite difficult, I have found in the game, to know what each character wants you to say to them. It's not as simple as that Minoru always wants the moral choice, but the choices in this game are morality, harmony, and wrath. Morality ties into vaccine type Digimon like Greymon. Harmony ties into data type Digimon like Agumon's other champion Tyrannomon. And mild spoilers for his third champion, who we have not seen in trailers to this point, but everyone knows at this point. Wrath ties into the virus attribute, which leads to Agumon's third champion, Tuskmon. That's it for spoilers. I'm not going to be talking about any of the ultimates or megas, don't worry. And the problem with this game really is that while on repeat runs it's going to be super handy, during your first run you always know which option is which. Morality is always going to be on your left, harmony is always going to be on your right, and wrathfulness is always going to be the up option. I would have liked to have been able to choose an option when starting the game that randomizes these, so that wrath isn't always up, so that I genuinely don't know which decision I'm making and can make decisions from my gut or with my informed knowledge. To me, it's much more interesting to play these games the first time as if I've never played them before, as if I have no idea what's going on, or more specifically what I would do in that situation. And that gets a lot more difficult when you know that the top answer is going to lead you to be Tuskmon and the right one's going to lead you to be Tyrannomon, you know? And the last thing that is a negative, but really is now our middle ground between the two, is something that I personally think is the strength of this game, but a lot of people have been put off by because they either don't like the concept or didn't read up on what the game was before buying it, and that is that Digimon Survive is very heavily a visual novel. The fact that it is a visual novel, plus I guess some launch problems that I talked about previously, has led to intense review bombing for this game on Metacritic. It's probably evening out between the recording, editing, and publishing of this video, but there seems to be a lot of people very angry that the visual novel with tactical RPG elements that came out is a visual novel with tactical RPG elements. Now, you are perfectly within your rights to not want a visual novel Digimon game. I personally think the visual novel style lends itself incredibly well to something which is very popularized by being an anime. It's one of the greatest ways you can convey anime storylines. But a lot of people are talking about how there's just so much text, so much to go through, but are undecided whether you're getting this game. Do you remember how much text there was in Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth? Do you remember how long the intro for Cyber Sleuth was before you could really do anything of use? Digimon Survive lets you skip cutscenes. Digimon Survive lets you fast forward through text, which Cyber Sleuth did not let you do. Digimon Survive even lets you put the game on auto, so if you've seen a cutscene before, you can just walk away and get a drink and come back to your next choice. I love the story games, but Digimon Survive actually gives you more options to read less text, even though it is a more text-heavy game. But another thing I need to impart to people is when you're making a decision about a video game, some research is needed. And while yes, of course, more games could always do with more marketing and be more clear, I believe personally, I think the only time that it was unclear that Digimon Survive was a visual novel with tactical RPG elements was right back at the start. I'm almost certain that I do remember original articles, at least articles, maybe not Bandai Namco themselves, running with Digimon Survive as a tactical RPG. But since pretty much 2019-2020, that has not been the case. And months ago, they made it clear that this game would be a 70-30 split of visual novel to tactical RPG. So that information has been very easily out there, even covered by more click-farmy, clickbaity titled headlines. And again, if that game is not for you, that's totally fine. But something I do want to impart is that Digimon Survive was never supposed to be the next big Digimon game. It was supposed to be the interim game. The unfortunate thing with Digimon Survive is that it went through two really major hurdles. The first being that the original development team, Witchcraft, could not deliver what Habu and his team wanted. There was clearly a lot of internal conflict on this game, but then of course the other giant elephant in the room besides me is COVID-19, which regardless of whether you fully buy that COVID-19 set back video games as much as they did. They set a lot of them back quite a bit. And so a game that was targeting 2020 slipped to 2021 and then eventually 2022. I think without COVID, Digimon Survive would have been a late 2020, early 2021 game. Maybe even like July 2021. But Digimon Survive was never supposed to be the next story game that you've all been wanting for. Never supposed to be the big JRPG. It was always supposed to be the interim title. And hey, guess what? Habu is still making the next Digimon story game. It has been 100% confirmed. They talked about it at Digimon Con this year. They're making it, it's focusing on the Olympus 12, and it is still in active development. Or at least active early development, kind of production, pre-production. Do not think of Digimon Survive as Digimon's next step forward, the only thing they're going to do forever. Digimon Survive is the Monster Hunter Stories to the Monster Hunter Rise that is the Digimon Story franchise. An important and valid game in the franchise, but doing something different to go alongside the existing incredibly successful series. Like I say, the Stories to the Rise, or the Final Fantasy Tactics to the Final Fantasy X. I think if people gave Digimon Survive more of a chance and were more assured that a new Digimon story game is coming, what I'm saying to you is I think it is worth giving Digimon Survive a chance. I understand that the price point of around $60 US is a little high for what this game might seem, but let's talk about the good. Future Karn here, and there is some stuff I do want to address in the interim between recording the initial video and the past few days. And first of all is this hate-click headline from Kotaku. Kotaku continuing to just post headlines to make people angry. And I will address that while there are some things in this article that are, you know, fine to observe, the result is a slog of a game that's 70% visual novel, 20% tactical role-playing, and 10% horror. The horror is in this bit. This part is hilarious. A gaggle of teenagers on a school camping trip who are unceremoniously transported to a mysterious world where fantastical anthropomorphic creatures called Digimon run amok. If you're thinking that concept sounds eerily similar to Pokemon, you're describing Digimon Adventure. Pokemon doesn't transport anybody, like they're in the world of Pokemon straight away. Have you watched either medium anyway? There are a few things here that are perfectly fine to say, the combat being a bit of a slog. This line here where it says the problem with Digimon Survive is that it takes forever for characters to travel across tiles in the game's large battle arenas, even if you speed up their animations by hitting the skip button. One thing is that you can have the battle animations go 3 times faster by default in the options if you check the options, but I will admit there are some battles where enemies do run away and it is a little bit annoying. Unless items or people in the environment have an exclamation point in them, you're wasting your time clicking them. Incorrect! There are many points in Digimon Survive where you can explore areas that do not have exclamation points on them, and they will get you bonus items. Factually incorrect there. And yes, there are a lot of items that will just get you that interaction, but sometimes when you revisit them, there will be an item there, or an item in that area. Rarely does exploration reward you with items that aid you in combat scenarios. Yes, it does actually, you get quite a lot of bandages and things like that, but also exploration gets you those hidden chapters, which explain 3 different pieces of backstory, which you wouldn't get if you didn't explore, so there's that. The teenagers and the Digimon in the game have the emotional fortitude of grade schoolers, which is honestly part of the game's charm. I'm glad you like that, because they are literally grade schoolers, they're like between 11 and 16. But anyway, I've talked far too much about this Kotaku article. The review bombing on Metacritic has subsided, with now a lot of people who've actually played the game giving it fair reviews. And I really don't think that a lot of these 70s, these mid-range reviews are unfair at all. A 7.5 I think is probably a fair reflection. I would probably say 8 from personal opinion, but I think 7.5 is definitely very fair. 7.9 on Switch, because I think Switch users are more fond of this kind of game. And then a 7.3 on the PC version. I'm gonna guess a lot of that is because of that Steam issue I talked about earlier. Now obviously Metacritic is hardly the best metric for whether a game is good or worth playing, but it does give you a general idea of how the player base of the game is now, rather than a bunch of review bombing. And while 7 out of 10s or whatever are perfectly fine, I would actually spend the time reading reviews, listening to people who've played its opinion on the game, not just taking numbers at first glance. Nintendo Life gave this an 8 out of 10 for reference. But something I do also want to address in the wake of this Kotaku article is I think that while we as Digimon fans who enjoy Digimon Survive want to defend the game, we can't forget that it isn't for everybody, and that criticism is totally fair. So when criticism is wrong, like objectively wrong, based on a falsehood, that's fine to debunk. But when someone finds a game boring, they're within their right to think that. We can't discredit every single person that didn't like Digimon Survive by saying, oh, they didn't Google it and didn't know it was a visual novel. Plenty of people knew exactly what kind of game it was and were still disappointed, and that is totally fine. That's why media is subjective and not objective. So while yes, this Kotaku article is driving hate clicks on purpose and contains some factual inaccuracies, it's okay if people do find this game painfully boring, but it's not a tactical RPG, it's a visual novel with tactical RPG elements. Anyway, back to Karn. First of all, the thing that people are probably thinking there is not too much of, and that is the battles, and I've done a lot of battles in Digimon Survive. During each chapter there are exploration phases, and each area has its own free battle. A lot of people are assuming that's basically the only battles you're going to do, but there's so many more. When you explore certain areas, like for example I believe the toilets in the first chapter, monsters can leap out at you and you can get certain non-essential battles. And if you are tired of reading text, you can just do as many free battles as you want. Level up your Digimon, farm items, recruit Digimon from the free battles, and the free battle Digimon change all the time as you advance through the story and advance through the areas. And so yes, battles are still ostensibly 30% of the game, but it's not like you're doing 70% story and then at the very end of a chapter doing a battle. You're doing a bit of story, battle, bit of story, battle, bit of story, maybe like 3 battles, and then a longer bit of story. Almost every big important part of each chapter also has an accompanying battle. And then transitioning into the non-battle gameplay, it's not just reading text. You get to explore areas, obviously. And within those areas, you have conversation with characters. When you do talk to those characters, you obviously get more dialogue, but also you get dialogue choices. Things you can do to raise their affinity, so you're still thinking, you're not just kind of skipping through, you're thinking about what they're saying. Then also in free roam, you have the camera option. Basically, every environment you visit, you can bring up your camera, and when you do, you can look around and try and find these kind of like data anomalies, or I guess spiritual anomalies, that could have Digimon hiding in them for more battles, items, or something else. And they also break up the reading and exploration by having some moments where your moves are limited, at least once a chapter. Rather than just being able to go wherever you want and read as much as you want, you will have to make specific choices about which characters you talk to. And depending on which characters you talk to in what order, and how many times you talk to specific characters, characters will determine how much of some of the story you will see and how much extra items you will get, more importantly. There are even missable items that have a whole backstory you can read in the menu. So that all orbits around the story, and the really refreshing thing about Digimon Survive is that the story is actually good. The characters are actually engaging. I'm not someone who gets particularly invested in fictional characters unless they came out, 10 years ago. My heart is dead and withered and cold. But the characters of Digimon Survive hooked me in straight away. There are characters I love, there are characters I hate, and there are characters that I feel kind of nothing about. And oh boy, there is one character in particular I hate. But with this incredible hook that if you don't keep up affinities or don't pursue certain story routes with some characters, they can die, this game gets so interesting. You start to worry about characters, start to worry about their Digimon. Will this choice with someone I don't like ultimately hurt more people I care about in this game? Like I said at the start, I am not a big fan of visual novels, but I have been streaming this through to chapter 7 and absolutely having a ball with it. The characters look amazing. The lighting they do for each area really helps to bring out the different characters' appearances, moods, things like that. And because there is variety throughout the visual novel elements, you find yourself paying so much more attention. I know way more about the story of Digimon Survive than I can even remember about the Ace Attorney games, and I've played them multiple times already. But obviously Digimon Survive is more fresh in my head, sure. I think the worst part of Digimon Survive for me is that prologue, that first 2 hours, the prologue in chapter 1. They are incredibly slow, and it does take a long time before you can get Agumon. But really, once you do, the game opens up and is truly wonderful. So, to wrap up, do I think you should get it? Yes and no. If you're a Digimon fan, I believe you are robbing yourself of an amazing experience with Digimon Survive by not getting it. And as a Digimon fan, I think it's important for us to support official releases like this because we want to see more of them. And while it's very easy for me to say support the official release when something is $60, I understand that's not always doable for everyone. But if you think this game looks decent or something you might even kind of like, I really do think it's worth picking up. There are people I have talked to who were really on the fence about Survive. In fact, there were a couple of people in my stream chat who said they actively hated how badly the launch of Survive went in their opinion, who have now sat down and played through the whole game, or at least up to like certain chapters, and are absolutely in love with it. This game is endlessly charming, and I think if you love Digimon, you're going to love it. But what if you're not a Digimon fan? Does it have the cyber sleuth effect? For visual novel fans, yes. I think this is one that visual novel fans will absolutely enjoy. If you're a fan of things like Danganronpa or even Persona, or are a fan of tactical RPGs, this game might be up your alley. If you like triangle strategy, Digimon Survive has way less text between battles than Triangle Strategy did, and did not receive anywhere near the hate that Digimon Survive has. If you do gravitate to text-heavy games and battles, I think you will really enjoy this game. Personally, as a fan of things like I say Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, I do find that that game had a little bit better of a talking to gameplay balance, but honestly, if you like things like Final Fantasy Tactics Advance or Final Fantasy Tactics, the regular one on PS1, it's actually not too dissimilar of a talking to battle kind of balance. I found myself having a very similar experience, but on top of that, the things that I'm familiar with, the horror, the scariness, the fear, and the really good storytelling drew me in. And then finally, are people who are not visual novel fans, your average gamer. Is this gonna be for you? Probably not. If you're not into Digimon, if you actively don't like Digimon, I don't think this is gonna convince you, especially if you do not like visual novels or tactical RPGs. If you really hate reading a lot of text, this game is not going to be for you, and that's absolutely fine. But generally, I would say that you are more likely to have a good experience with Digimon Survive if you are a Digimon fan or familiar with Japanese games than you would a bad one, because the game is really solid, minus some problems that are there at launch. But I do think it needs to be recognized regardless that Digimon Survive is a really great game, and Habu and the team at Hyde and whatever Witchcraft also did amazing work on this, and that should be recognized. And so I personally, as a Digimon fan, I'm glad that I spent my money on this game and I'm enjoying it. And I think a lot of the anger you might feel towards this game will mellow out if you give it a chance and view it in that context as not the next Digimon story game, but something to keep us going in the meantime. And the good news is that this game is doing really well. It is number 2, or at least time of recording, is number 2 best selling on Steam, just behind Stray, with about an 81% positive, like you will like this score from Steam users. And we're predicting it probably has pretty good sales in Japan, as well as other things like PS4, Switch, etc., but those are going to come out in time. So I do think that Digimon Survive stands a pretty good chance of selling generally pretty well around the world. And I can even see this being one of those games that, while there was a lot of heat at launch, I think a year down the line, 2 years down the line, is going to become one of those like Digimon cult classics that so many people enjoy. This is genuinely a great game, and I hope that this video will have helped you make your decision on whether or not you're going to pick it up. Huge shout outs to my Sovereign ZDK14, as well as everyone else else who supports this channel with their hard-earned money. It really does mean the absolute world to me. Check out a video below you because it's going to be one on Digimon Survive that I've done in the past, probably the one where I really got the evolutions for that game wrong, and I will see you next time when we go digital. Bye bye.